Hola, welcome to Financially Savvy in 20 Minutes, a bilingual podcast that shares interviews with self-made millionaires, financially savvy investors, and all things financial literacy and dinero. Your host, Natalie Torres, is a two-time TEDx speaker and award-winning author, investor, and financially savvy Latina that has been featured on NBC, Telemundo, and Forbes as a financial literacy and mental health advocate. She is joined by her co-host, Vera Eatley, an author, investor, and seasoned insurance professional.
Welcome back to part 2 of our interview with Dr. Emir Estrada.
Because there's such a full circle, like I said, knowing you for so long and you've seen my journey, my life, personal journey as well, these past couple of decades. You just said something, or a couple of things that through my mind that were like, oh my gosh, she's giving gold nuggets. First off, yes, we're all educational information here, but you have the experience to tell people about investing, about buying your home car, all these things that I love. And you said something that people are like, you need to look the part. When I hear people say that, usually it's broke people mentality because they don't know what rich real wealth is. And I've introduced Dr. Emir to some of my personal friends who definitely have wealth. You would not guess they have wealth because they don't look it. What I mean by look it is they don't spend money on things that are frivolous and they invest in themselves and their community, right? And you're one of those people. Even like one of your first books it's Kids at Work, and you could talk a little bit more about that too. But you had that mindset. And for me, when someone tells me you don't look the part, people have seen my car too. I have a good car. It's a beautiful car. Actually, I love my car. But people see it and they're like, why aren't you driving this? Or why aren't you driving that? In my head, I'm like, because I got a lot more money than you do. That's why. And so a lot of people associate that conversation like, how many cars have you had in your lifetime? How many, how many bags do you have that are worth blah, 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 blah? How many shoes have you spent? If you look at my closet, it's not a walk-in closet on purpose. And not to nag on any of those things, but it's teaching, especially our culture, especially first generation, not just college grads, doctors, masters, all of us here. It's having that conversation of what it really looks like. And I remember this particular experience, you had invited me to go to, I forget what event was, but I was with your friend, Adri, the lawyer. So imagine us, three of us walking into this amazing event. Actually, we were leaving the event and some gentleman pulls us to the side. I think it's pretty privileged. I'll call it that. I'll flex for us. But back then we were in our late 20s. And he says, oh, you girls should come and work for me. Da, 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 da. You're beautiful. Blah. And I remember the three of us just stopped in our tracks, looked at him. And I forget, granted, we didn't remember this. We didn't have to say anything. But I think we were both kind of, once again, angry. And I'm like, let's make this point. And I think he thought he was doing us a favor. But I'm like, I think I point to her. I'm like, okay, first of all, she's a doctor. And then you were like, and she's a lawyer. And at the time, I'm like, I teach financially. He was probably like, what is that? Yeah. But we knew our worth and we didn't need someone to tell us that. And so undervaluing, underestimation, coming from anger, half of my stuff comes from someone just rubbed me the wrong way or told me the wrong thing. Not that I'm always influenced by that. But that's the immigrant and Latino mentality at times where it's like, you're wrong about that situation. And we're doing it because we want to invest in our families and our communities. And the fact that you are the professor that everybody dreams about when they see, they're like, oh my God, I see myself in that. But I had this conversation where yesterday I met one of my old professor mentors. He was the only person of color. This was over 20 years ago in college, right? In the College of Business, the only person of color, get that, as a professor. And all my professors were all male. And so the fact that I didn't even get to take his class, but I knew of him gave me strength to keep moving forward because I found myself crying many times to my other professors. And you are that representation where women see it and they're like, I could be that. I've been there. And then you sharing your struggles, and I didn't expect to cry and all these things. So forgive me for that. So that's why I said we need to make this a two-parter. Before we end, I do want to ask you one more question. We're going to have you back because you just made me think of so many other topics, but because you also, I failed to mention she's a multi-author as well, right? One thing that you would maybe advice that you're going to give to a soon to be graduating senior, because there's, graduation season is here. People are probably in that. And I'm one of those people that it took about a year to find a good job. And so I know it's going to take other people longer sometimes. And with these different challenges with AI that you and I did not have to deal with, what would you recommend for them to not lose the courage and the faith and understand their worth is definitely valuable?
This is a great question. And I actually have these conversations with my students the first time that I have contact with them, even if they're the first year, right? And what I have them do is I have them reverse engineer their CV or their resume. And what that looks like is this is their first year. And I say, in 4 years or in 2 years, if they're transfer students, how would you like your CV to look like, right? And sometimes they don't know, and it's great. So I have them, okay, meet someone who's, about to graduate. What internships have they done? Where are they working? What classes have they studied abroad? And what opportunities are available here? What scholarships? What internships? What service opportunities? And it opens it basically gives them a blueprint of what they can do in the next 4 years. Now, if it's year 4 and you're just starting to think about these questions, it's never too late. Again, reach back to your professors. Sometimes we know of opportunities that students, sometimes I need students to do work for me, or I know someone who's hiring, and students don't underutilize the resources that we have as professors. Sometimes they don't come to our office hours. And again, we're just there waiting for students to come and have conversations with us. It doesn't have to be intimidating. But again, this is an opportunity for us to get to know the student on a personal basis, to get to know their stories. And guess what? When they need a letter of recommendation, then I can write a very strong letter of recommendation, because other than saying the student was in my class on this year and these are the assignments that they got excellent grades, and this was the final grade, I can talk about how they are their first in their families to go to college, how they work while they were at ASU, how they volunteer in all of these places. So I can really humanize their story through a letter, and that carries a lot of weight. So I would tell the students, you're not alone. Reach back to your professors. And you know what? I am giving this advice from a student. When I went to UCLA, I didn't follow this advice. I was too shy. I always thought, okay, I got good grades. I'm never going to see these people again. And guess what? 3 years later, when I thought I want to go to grad school, so I drove to UCLA and I met with my professor, Ruben Hernandez Leon, which I'm very grateful that he wrote a letter for me when other professors said no, because they're like, you were 1 in 300. I don't remember you. I cannot write a letter for you. And I got several no's. So this professor, who's now a dear colleague, and he has given me more opportunities now also by inviting me to give job talks and I'm sorry, not job talks, book talks. And he said, yes, I'll write the letter for you. Give me the essays that you wrote in my class. And I said, because I was advised to say this, will you be able to write me a strong letter of recommendation? And I still remember that he looked at me and he said, if I wouldn't say yes. And I'm like, okay, thank you. But you wanna say that, right? Like, will you write me a strong letter of recommendation? And what information do you need? I also asked my students to give me a brag sheet. I'm like, sometimes we do so many things that do not go in our CVs, right? And I'll plug my book here. When I wrote the book, Kids at Work, I interviewed children who street vend with their parents in the informal sector of the economy in Los Angeles. So they're street vending with their parents side by side. And these are children that had been street vending with their parents since they were little, 5 years old, all through college. And when I was working with a 17-year-old, and I read about her in the education chapter, I was helping her put together her CV, her resume for her college applications. And when we got to the portion of job experience, she said, Emir, I don't have any work experience. And I said, ¿Cómo que no? Like, you've been working with your parents since you were little. Like, what do you mean you have no work experience? And she said, what am I going to put? That I'm a street vendor? Again, because street vending has stigma attached to it. It's not seen as a real occupation. It's seen as something backwards, something that shouldn't happen in the US. So we said, we figured out a way to work it, but we listed all of her skills. And so we
entrepreneurship.
were entrepreneurship, yes. Family economy.
Sales. So many.
She was in charge of her family's finances. I mean, the level of skills that she had, babysitting, it's incredible. So for someone to believe, but they make us believe that, right? That this is not real work, or this work doesn't count, or it's not valuable, or there isn't a space in this document where we can list these skills or experiences that we've had. And I hope that my book also changes that, right? Like, no, this is a real contribution. And I've had conversations with LAUSD teachers, and I think a light bulb comes up for them as well when they're like, oh, these are my students. These are students that are in my classroom. And again, I think it's a domino effect, right? Then we have an opportunity to reframe these conversations and reframe these experiences. So that's what yes.
I love that they have you, because I used to be a college recruiter. So I used to work with large companies that would go into campuses to recruit students for our internships. And a lot of our minority students, I would struggle so much with being like, you have work experience. Like, you being in, a babysitter and you being at the taqueria with your parents, as somebody who grew up in the restaurant industry with my mom as a waitress, like it was so hard sometimes to, be on the employer side and also be like, they would come to job fairs thinking that they didn't have anything to add to their resume. And it would be like, no, let's do a workshop on filling your resume because there's so much power that comes with our everyday lives growing up as children of immigrants, as first generation, that sometimes a lot of these systems are not used to using that language. So they make you also believe that you don't have any work experience. So they are so lucky to have you in those classrooms to be able to coach them and empower them along the way. So when they are at these job fairs talking to these employers, they know the right terminology. They know how to present themselves and they know how to tell their own narrative because we live in a world, right, that tells a narrative for us, especially for students that look like us. And how do we keep switching the shift of narrative? And how do we even teach those adults around us, like not to be part of that narrative instead of empowering our own students to embrace and really own what their life experience has been like? So I love that you get to do that for them.
I think we're going to have to restructure the title of this podcast is College Grads Know Your Worth, and this is how you'll get the job. Thank you so much for those helpful tips. So many people can be doing that for looking for them jobs themselves, right? If they've already been out in the workforce to be able to do that. A small hack that I'm going to add, and I like how she said, are you going to write me a strong recommendation? If they say no, my professor, rest in peace, Dr. France, he did not have time, but he knew me, but not, he said, honestly, I don't have time. And it was because and that's my fault. I had less than 2 days to submit for a scholarship that I knew I was going to be able to get. I just needed another recommendation. He said, write it to me, email it to me. I'll look it over. If I like it, I'll print it out on my letterhead. Mm-hmm. And I wrote by far the best letter recommendation because I had to do what you just said, all these things. And then he came back and said, no wonder you're a 3.5 student in my class. You're working how many jobs? You've done all these things. He's like, you're my best student ever. And I said, thank you. And so, once again, professors want to help you. If they don't have the time, then, write yourself a strong recommendation letter. If you don't know how to, you definitely need to reach out to Dr. Emir Estrada. How can people reach out to you? And I know we're going to have you again for a podcast. Thank you for your time. But what's the best way for them to connect with you?
So I do have a website. They can look me up, emirestrada.com.
Thank you so much. To learn more about the podcast, follow us on Instagram at FinSavvy in 20 minutes and catch our interviews on YouTube. If you want to become a sponsor, hire us for your next workshop or speaking engagement, reach out to us at financiallysavvyin20minutes.com or send us a DM. All it takes is 20 minutes out of your day to become financially savvy.